an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 1, Episode 10. I'm back at camp with Josh. In this episode, so Josh does this volunteering thing that Paula manages to sort of squeeze Rebecca into the way she do. And I gotta say that this might be the most awkward of all the episodes so far, which is really saying something considering what the last episode was like. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Huge thanks to Julia for commissioning this episode. I am really enjoying this show, even though there are some real cringy moments. I have a hard time, and I know a lot of people who are extremely empathetic also have a hard time with cringe humor. It's always been something that's like a staple in comedy that I have varying reactions to, but a lot of the time it's like, it can be just straight up hard for me to watch. Like, this is part of why I didn't like, oh my God, is it Curb Your Enthusiasm that I tried to watch? There were a couple shows that people were really into and I couldn't do it. And similarly, a lot of like movies, like the Meet the Fockers, you know, that few, I think there are like 3 or 4 of those. I can't cope with movies in which it's just a series of like more and more upsetting things happening. And yet this show is kind of that. And yet they do it because they, like, the way that everything happens and unfolds is so much more character driven that it's less cringy for me and more interesting. Does that make sense? So it's not like, you know, a lot of cringe humor has to do with people accidentally doing something stupid and then having to cover it up. Like, you'll break something and you have to pretend it's not broken. And then there's like a series of weird, like, you know, machinations that you have to go through and make yourself look slightly ridiculous to try and cover up this other thing. And a lot of times it will feel kind of futile to me because I'm like, you know, you're just making yourself look more nuts trying to cover for this other thing, which I'm pretty sure if you just told them the truth, they would be less upset than they are at what they perceive as your normal behavior. But this show, everything that's super awkward stems from genuinely who these people are. And the awkwardness of it is sort of like mitigated. I hesitate to use that word because it makes it sound like it's not effective if I use that word, but that's not what I mean. But it's at least sort of supported by the fact that the people around them are often like aware that something is off with this person as well. And that's what winds up happening in like the resolutions of the episodes. It's not just about wanting to make us laugh because of an awkward situation. It's wanting to make us laugh and like hope that this person learns their lesson and like does better. And usually they do. They wind up in another situation later on, but you know, it tends to be because of a different factor. So anyway, this episode, like, it's kind of nuts that last episode there is a genuinely like impromptu, inappropriate pole dance, which is, that is so awkward. And yet I found myself feeling a lot more uncomfortable this time than I did then. And I think a lot of that is on purpose, that we're meant to like get in the headspace of somebody who's like in high school. Both because we are surrounded by teenagers this episode, and also because Rebecca is like tapping into her teenage self, and she does so in an unfortunately effective way. I feel like this is one of those things that, depending on your experience in high school, could go a number of ways. Like when people say that they want to leave high school behind entirely, that's not something that I feel, because I had a great time for a lot of high school. I won't even say most of it, but for a lot of it. And there are things that I wish I could get back regarding my personality. Like there was a certain imagination that I had, and a certain, like, I wouldn't even say lack of self-awareness so much as like a disregard. And I was willing to take a lot more risks. So in that aspect, I do miss in some ways who I used to be, because I have grown so much more cautious as I get older, and that's natural, but also frustrating because it does limit you. Rebecca is tapping back into a version of herself that was even more obsessed, arguably, with Josh Chan than she is now. And this is the part of me in high school that I would most definitely leave behind in a heartbeat. The part of me that was dependent on male opinion at times, and that was really a poor judge of what was a healthy or good relationship. It was, I mean, I look back at some of the things that I put up with, or the things that I found charming versus alarming. It's a good relationship name, charming versus alarming, for a relationship self-help book. And I realized just how young I was. I just didn't understand, you know, and frankly, a lot of us, even adults, didn't understand. So the advice or the enforcement that I received from those around me tended to encourage things that I look back and realize were bad for me or bad for him. And Rebecca is sort of like going back there in a way that she thinks is charming and is alarming. And she's doing it without really looking at what wound up happening at the end. Because as much as the letter that she, like, it winds up going in a good direction by the end, but she's reading Josh a letter that she wrote in a period when he was clearly not feeling the vibe between the two of them, and wound up dumping her. And that, for me, would be the thing that I would be actively trying to avoid. And it's sort of amazing that throughout this episode, she keeps on, like, and so does Paula. They keep on talking about how, oh, you're going to get the magic back. It'll be just like it was when you guys were in love. And I'm like, no, y'all broke up right after. So that means shit was not going right during this time. You know, this is like me wanting to go back to like 6 months before I left my husband. Why would you do that? You know, and clearly she's just operating under her perception of everything, which is bizarrely unaffected by the way it ended. You would think that if you thought everything was going great and you were both having a good time, and you suddenly realized that the other party was not having a good time, and they dumped you, and it felt kind of out of nowhere, would that not cause you to recontextualize everything that you thought had been great in the previous couple of months? Because it would for me, 100%. There would be so many things that I would grow newly self-conscious about that at the time I thought were just like funny little things. And then I start to realize maybe it wasn't. Maybe this person saw this in a totally different way than I did. And I was like amused, or I thought it was really cute, and they thought it was cloying and clingy and weird. And I just kept on being startled by the fact that Rebecca doesn't have that perspective on this at all. And I don't know if that's an aspect of her denial. I don't know why Paula is on the same page with her in that regard, because normally Paula is the one that's sort of speaking the hard truths, or the remote perspective that you get from the outside that Rebecca desperately needs to hear, right? Like that tends to be the role that Paula plays. And yet she is kind of like encouraging and seeing it all this from the same perspective as Rebecca, which I found really puzzling. So I just wanted to put that out there because I understand wanting to get back certain moments of magic, but going back to a place that directly preceded a breakup that broke my heart so badly that it still hurts as an adult, I just can't really understand or relate to that. I don't really, I can't figure out why that's something comforting or a time that you still look back on with happiness, because it would, for me, have just tarnished the entire summer, you know? So anyway, I'm going to start talking about the episode now. That's what y'all are here for, right? So, when we start this episode out, there is, and there's a whole other thing going on, but we'll get there. Daryl is just like the storyline with him I'm very excited about. So we start off at the little boba hut. I gotta say that I'm really enjoying the boba hut being kind of like the spot in this show where people get together, like in Friends for the coffee shop. And Paula is making her say with using his full name that she loves Joshua Felix. Is it Joshua Felix? I'm waiting to see what she says. Yes, Joshua Felix Chan. I enjoy that that's his middle name. I don't know why, but Felix is one of those names that's like always a good idea, whether it's a human being or a cat. I've met a couple of cats named Felix, and I like it. And she is talking about wanting to marry Josh and have mixed race babies. And she says something about how they're so much cuter than the plain ones. Oh, brother. This is one of those things that's interesting because I, similarly to some other things about, like mixed race people, I had a very different understanding growing up that was in direct like opposition to what apparently the commonly understood meaning is behind some of these like mentalities. Because Rebecca's white, and there is oftentimes a sort of assumption that is made by people of color that when a white person says that they think mixed race babies are really cute, what they mean is straight up black babies aren't cute, but as long as there's a little whiteness in there to sort of like mix it up, then they're cute. And me as a kid, I was brought up with a white mother who was, as much as she didn't realize there were some things that she said or implied that were kind of like racist or at least like not super understanding of where I came from, most of the time she was extremely down on the aesthetic of white people and the boringness of white faces and white body types. So when I was like talked to about being mixed by my mom, she would say things like, "You're so lucky that your father is in there to mix up my boring ass genes." Or she would see mixed race babies and be like, "Oh, babies that aren't just straight up white are so much cuter. Like, look at these." And it was meant to be an encouragement of getting out of pure white space and getting in some different genes to mix things up and make people look more interesting. And of course that still is exoticizing and fetishizing. So there's like still a side eye there, but it was the total opposite of what I found out later is what a lot of people feel, which is that white people don't want somebody who's purely of another race. They want that race to be mixed safely with somebody white so that they are not basically an alien. And that realizing was like that this is the perception was like so startling to me because that was just not how I was taught to see things at all. And in this moment, when she says they're so much cuter than the plain ones, it could be really taken either way. Like, oh, it's so much better if there's white blood in these plain black babies or Asian babies or whatever. But I hear it the way that my mother would say it, which is plain white babies are boring. and not that cute. Throw in something else to make them like a little different, and they are so much more adorable. Either way, it's still like fetishizing and not great, but at the same time, you know, people are going to say what they're going to say about appearance, and that's like, it's tricky. And Paula is trying to say that she should sneak into Josh's house one day while Valencia is away and climb into the bed naked and wait for Josh, and that she has done this a few times and it has worked every time. No. Like, no. At all. Look, Paula, I love you. You know I do. And you know that I love your ridiculous ideas, and I'm not even like totally sure that you mean this seriously. But Josh is, and we'll come to this later, part of the appeal of Josh is the fact that he is like a decent dude. And if he reacts with anything other than horror and upset at finding a naked woman who is not his girlfriend in his bed in his home, that's a bad sign and a red flag. So no, don't do that unless you're trying to simultaneously get a metric for how much of a scumbag he is and ruin your prospects at ever having a chance with him ever again. And there's like this whole weird sort of, what's the word I want? Coincidence I get. I wish that there was a time that we could go back to, or a way that we could get him to remember how it felt when we were at camp together. Every time we saw each other, it was like Cupid's arrow went straight through our hearts. And I'm really wanting to know how that can possibly be true. Are we assuming that everything was great up until the last second? Are we assuming that like he only dumped her because he realized the distance was going to be a problem? Or are we assuming that she's in as much denial about how things were with them at summer camp as she is about everything else? Regardless, she gets interrupted mid-sentence with Josh turning up and blowing a straw paper at her. And he is getting a bunch of snacks, and it turns out that he's picking them up for these kids that he volunteers with. This is one of those things that I have a strange, like, counterintuitive sort of relationship with. I have no interest in having children. Anybody who listens to the show or follows me on Facebook knows children is just so not something that I want or have ever wanted. Like, there are little tiny moments of like, I would love to be able to roll out Christmas cookies with some kids during Christmas time. I bet that's fun. Little like activities are the moments when I'm like, oh, that'd be cute. And then I immediately am like, oh, but I can go to bed whenever I want, and I don't have to worry about somebody screaming and needing my boob in their mouth, unless it's Owen, or any number of the things that wind up changing your life forever. I don't have to worry about that, and so never mind, I'll borrow somebody's kids at Christmas to roll out cookies. But I volunteered with some at-risk youth in Hartford when I lived in Connecticut, and let me tell you, that was one of the best experiences ever. And I was also a camp counselor at a camp called Caritas in California, which I wonder if that is still there. Caritas was the place in Hartford. Well, never mind. Anyway, there was more than one time that I was working with kids who were disadvantaged in some way. And these kids, they could be tough, but it was really, honestly, kind of surprising how well behaved a lot of them were, and how much they just clearly just wanted someplace to go where people weren't going to be dicks to them, and where they could just hang out and like screw around and not be in danger or be judged for it. And the fact that this means so much to Josh makes total sense to me. Like, he is somebody who has a little bit of trouble growing up, and this is a wonderful way to sort of reconcile that, where you could simultaneously be an adult and be in charge and manage, but you can also indulge the side of yourself that is still very childlike and enjoys a lot of that stuff. And I am somebody who still loves crafts. I love baking. I love painting my nails. I love doing stuff in an over the top way, like a friggin' second grade teacher would do in a lot of aspects of my life. So hanging out with kids for me just was so perfect in that regard. There was a lady who allowed me to buy all of these different nail polishes, and she paid for them. She was like a donor. And I did all of the girls' nails one afternoon with nail art and everything. Little things like that. I baked with them and helped them to learn how to make calzones from scratch. It was the coolest. And I really despise Valencia's reaction to this whole thing, because it is, here's the thing, is that Valencia is a little bit of a disappointment in general on this show, not because you don't like her, because to a degree, we're not that's fine. I don't mind somebody not being likable, but she is way less dimensional than I expected by now. I kind of thought that it was interesting what they were doing in the first episode where we meet her, where Rebecca, it's like Valencia is simultaneously awful, but also a lot of things that Rebecca wants to be. And there is I did have some sympathy with her being I just want to have a friend, and even you are trying to make out with me. Are you serious? And now it's they have made it a bit of a joke that Valencia thinks everybody's obsessed with her when they're really not. But I'm kind of low-key yo, but that could be true if you weren't just talking about ghosts being obsessive. And there are some other aspects of her personality that I feel really puzzled if she's like this all the time. What drew Josh to her other than the fact that she's super hot? And his friends seem equally confused. And this happens. People can be drawn to somebody that you're genuinely what do you see in this person? I see no redeeming quality. But I would kind of like it if there was anything about her that I understood, the draw. And I feel like it would just be a little bit more fun to watch if I weren't rooting for her and Josh to break up. Even if Rebecca doesn't wind up with Josh, I'm starting to feel a little bit better about her being attracted to him, because at first I was just you guys are so bad for each other. And they're really starting to establish some things that make it clearer that maybe they wouldn't be terrible for each other. But I would like to see something that makes me go, okay, her and Josh kind of do well together, though I understand why their relationship is at the point that it's at where they've moved in together. And I was a bit bummed out at the cartoonishness of her disregard of something that means a lot to him here. What it winds up being is basically that she wants him to take on the extra, the overtime at work that is available, because she thinks that could lead to him being promoted to manager. And that if he gets promoted to manager, when they have kids, he will actually be able to provide. Now, I'm assuming Josh Chan wants kids. That's not even really a question. But the fact that there isn't a sort of, this is something that comes up for me a lot, though. There are so many people in relationships who have not really talked about what they want in the future in a way that would bring issues to the foreground and get them discussed before you're in over your head and realizing that you'll basically have to upend your life because you didn't find out something this basic. But she is sort of assuming that this is going to happen soon. But in my opinion, because of the way that she's acting, he'll still be working where he is now by then. Maybe it's his dream job. Maybe he will be, But also, girl, she clearly has not worked retail, because I think we all know that if you work retail, whether or not you take on overtime and do all of that isn't necessarily what winds up factoring in on whether or not you get promoted to manager at all. Yeah. But she is really kind of trying to passive aggressively, not subtly at all, nudge him in the direction of saying that this is going to be his last year and saying goodbye to these kids, and generally implying that this is a complete waste of his time and his energy and his talents, and that he is like disappointing her and their future hypothetical family by not putting them ahead of himself and his desires now, despite the fact that they do not yet exist. And the whole way that like she talks to him is so condescending and so gross and hard to watch. And Josh, it's hard to like see him take this and not totally call her out on it. He kind of does, but he says, sometimes it's like you don't understand me or don't believe in me at all, and it sucks. And that's as much as he says, because it's the content of what she's saying. But I wish so much that he would talk to her about the way she speaks to him like he's a child, like literally a child. And I understand that to a point, Josh is supposed to be like the youngest acting, the most immature. And so maybe we're supposed to also think that he's a little stupid. And I mean, clearly there are moments when he is very stupid. Don't get me wrong. But again, with moments like this, it's hard for me to see him and Rebecca together. I don't know. I guess it's really just like Josh shouldn't be in a relationship. Josh should be single. Like, that's kind of where I'm at with him as a character. It's just like, he's a kid and he's doing good volunteering with this group of kids, but like, let him just do this and be this and not worry about a relationship or anything further, But anyway, she says, I believe that one day you will focus on our future instead of fun stuff. And like, what a thing to say. We'll focus on our future instead of fun stuff. Y'all, if somebody said that to you, I mean, you're just like, what? That's bleak. Yikes. Right? But that's how it is. So Paula, in the scene where he meets up with them, is suggesting that Rebecca can be another volunteer, another camp counselor where Josh is volunteering. And Rebecca, of course, is like, at first I kind of thought Rebecca was going to feel that Paula was doing that thing again where she just like pushes a little too hard. But no, she's totally on board. And she goes to a meeting with a woman who is in charge of part of this group. And I don't remember the name of the charity or whatever you want to call it. But she tells Rebecca basically that when we say get involved, because Rebecca's like giving her all these ideas for hands-on things that she can do, activities, speeches, all this. She's like, when we say get involved, what we mean is give us money. And Rebecca's like, oh, okay. And she's in the middle of talking about what she could do. Like, anyway, like blowing right past that. The director is kind of impatient, being like, you're not hearing me. But then Rebecca hands her a check with enough money that this lady backs up immediately and is like, oh shit. Okay. I guess you are the new director of female empowerment. So that worked out. Good on you, Rebecca. I really liked this moment because it is true. People talk about volunteering and doing this as like a, and don't get me wrong. There are a lot of things that do need actual physical volunteers. But oftentimes volunteering is not very effective as a means of helping. It's a good thing to do if you don't have money to offer and you have time and you would like to do. And if that is the case, if you have time on your hands, the best thing to do is to become a consistent repeat volunteer. That was what I did in Hartford. I went down there 3 times a week and I did that for probably about 5 months in a row until I moved away. But volunteers need training. They need to be like kind of given orientation, and that takes manpower and energy. And if you only volunteer like once, that's a bunch of time that they spent when they could have been, the person training you could have been doing things that are actually important. They just spent half a day training somebody that's not coming back, or that isn't going to even have time by the end of that day to do any of the things they have been trained on. And that is a huge time suck and resource suck. So this sort of attitude of just give us money is frankly really practical. As much as people want the feel-good moment of like literally planting a tree or literally handing somebody a plate of food or whatever, unless you are somebody who is willing to commit time weekly and consistently, that's not really going to be that helpful to the people who are in charge. So I really understood this lady and, you know, have been in this position where people are like, well, how can I help? And they want to like take on something hands-on because that feels better to them. When in fact, we just need fucking money, guys. Like, it's not that deep. And the thing about people volunteering as well is that they intend the best things when they say that they will show up, when they say that they will come and do XYZ. And those things don't happen a lot of the time. People can mean well and not deliver. And that happens so often with people that you are very good friends with, honestly, sometimes. So this scene just spoke to me in that way. So we come to this scene with Greg. And him and Heather are making out. And she is being vulnerable and honest for like the very first time. I feel like it comes in like little spurts with her where she'll suddenly get real and you're like, oh, Heather, what's up? But then it goes immediately back to irony or something. And in this scene, she's being straight up honest with him about the fact that she really likes him and that she is into this. And he gets very weirded out by her saying that she really likes him and is into this without following it up with a joke. And he tries to follow it up with a joke. And she has to sort of be like, no, I'm serious. I really like you a lot. And he just is fucking uncomfortable as hell and proceeds to make it all the more uncomfortable by like insisting on it being a joke. And I'm just like watching with my face just in my hands, like, oh my God, dude, what are you doing? I am not somebody who loves feelings. Feelings are just, honestly, they just take up a lot of energy and they're very inconvenient almost all the time. And I hate them because they just get in the way. Of course, at the same time, what is life without any emotions? Like, it's pointless and stupid and boring and terrible. So I don't want to not have them, but I just wish that I could like pick times to have them and not have them just like popping up whenever they fucking felt like it, is all I'm saying. Greg is a whole other thing we find out, which is that he has this like idea in his head that as soon as he starts to care about somebody, that they are going to bail on him. So it's better for him to not grow attached. It's better for him to keep people at arm's length and not like them too much because he's just sort of setting himself up for pain later on down the line. And unfortunately, a lot of people have this sort of like mentality because they have actually been let down. I appreciate that this is talked about in terms like later on that are compassionate, because it's really easy to do the like, oh, he's afraid of commitment thing with a character and have it be pretty shallow and just, oh, he doesn't want to be tied down. And that's how he tries to frame it, which is really amusing. That, oh, I just want to be a bachelor, just doing what I want. I don't want to have a lady dragging me down, the old ball and chain. Am I right? He tries to make it like it's that. But instead, what we know is that he still deals with abandonment issues from his mom. And I mean, he has this relationship with his dad that's pretty decent, and now his father is ill. And who knows about his like past relationships and his history there. He protects himself with this attitude. It's not as selfish as it can be in different cases. And it's hard to see this, you know, like, because it feels so understandable to me. It's not exactly relatable because I have no problem growing attached. And if things go badly, then I'm just like, well, I guess I'll suffer. But seeing from the outside, the way that he's behaving just struck a chord with me where I was like, oh, I get that. Like, I don't do this, I don't think, but I could really understand this being the way that you decide to handle things. And I felt really bad for Heather being on the receiving end of this, because there is a point that I feel like a lot of us don't reach, which is we get to a spot in our lives where we understand like our trauma and our baggage, and then we stop there and we don't actually try to improve ourselves and be better, because we think that getting to the root and just discovering why is enough, and that then we can just explain ourselves and be like, well, I'm this way because of this, and that this person that you're with should just accept that and be comfortable with that being the norm. And the truth is, everybody's got trauma, everybody's got baggage, and you get to the root of it and discover why, yes, but then you have to actually take responsibility for your behavior and admit that sure, you have an instinctive like reaction to certain things, or you have a pattern that you follow with certain things, and you need to work on that and be better about that and be more aware when somebody calls you out that this is a problem for them and you, and that you don't get to just throw out your history as an excuse to pardon being a shitty person time and time again. And this is something that especially men have not really been taught. Women are always encouraged to look at themselves and their own behaviors as a springboard for why things are the way they are in a relationship, because it's our fault. And we are the ones who need to understand not only ourselves, but we need to analyze our partner as well and accommodate them. Men are not encouraged to be introspective in this same way, or to seek help in this same way. Women are the ones that are over emotional and hysterical. We're the ones that need psychiatrists and therapists, not men. And the number of men out there who get into a relationship with a woman anticipating her to basically be their therapist is off the charts. It's so common. The responsibility for their mental health and their behavior is put entirely on whomever they happen to be in a relationship with at that time. And I love that this episode ends with him going through a like self-help book about commitment and dealing with your phobias about it and your shitty attitudes, and addressing it in a way that's like, no, this is my issue to deal with, not theirs. And I just really appreciate the whole direction of this so much. So when he talks to his friends later about it, they are all aware of the fact, and by all I say White, Josh, and Hector. Hector says, you're like making up problems as an excuse to break up with her. And White Josh says, I think your behavior reflects a deep-seated fear that if you love somebody, she'll leave you. It's probably rooted in your childhood trauma. And Greg is just like, guys, what the fuck? Because they're all young, good-looking, fit dudes, and they're supposed to be like, yeah, man, don't let yourself get tied down. And instead they are totally like, hey, buddy, you got some issues here you might need to work on. And it's wonderful and very unexpected. So at this moment, we are interrupted by boss whose name I can never remember and always want to call Dwayne. Daryl. I remembered. Ha ha ha. And he is feeling really lonely. And we get this scene of him like talking to a snail, Snailiana Grande. That is her pet snail. And he is very eager when they all talk about wanting to see a pay-per-view fight that they can't afford to host for them. And he is absolutely unfamiliar with boxing or like any of this, but doesn't care. He just wants people around. He just wants to do something. I love this dude. It's so the only thing I wish is that he didn't try and pretend that he knew what boxing was about. It just be like, hey dude, I would love to have you guys over and hang out. House is empty. Let's do a thing. I don't know about boxing. Y'all can teach me about boxing. But instead, he like tries to pretend that he knows what is going on here. And I'm just like, buddy, these guys are cool. You don't need to like front with them. It's fine. But he doesn't really know that yet, to be fair. So yeah, he is like throwing this little gathering shindig. And, the song that goes with this is having a few people over. It's this house song. Guys, I cannot tell you. I am absolutely going to find the song, and I am 100% going to play it when I clean my house before I have people over. This is the best. Like, there are a lot of songs on this show that I really enjoy for the cleverness of the lyrics and the tunes even and the performance. But this is one of those that the utter simplicity and the decision to like do a spoof house song that's just got the one line repeated over and over. That's not even a full sentence. I don't know why, but this like just got to me so bad. I love it so much. And like the intercutting of him with like laser lights and glow sticks and everything. But then all of a sudden we're back in just like his ordinary apartment and he's just like, puffing up some pillows and cutting onions to make his dip and whatever, or his pate. I adore this so much. And as it turns out, the gathering isn't really as much fun. They all expected there to be like, this bout that starts right away. But it turns out that there are like other fights. And I don't know. I have never watched a pay-per-view fight. So Greg says something about there are still 3 more undercard fights. I don't know what that means, but I assume that this is like the openers at a concert and you just like have to sit through artists that you don't necessarily know or like in order to get to the person that you actually do like. Which it sounds like it just goes on for quite a while. I went to a Slick Rick concert and there was this opening set that was no joke, about twice as long as the Slick Rick concert. And it was excruciating. And it was like this rap group that contained like 13 dudes. It was way too many. And it was just like one of those that I still think back on. And I'm like, I low-key wish that I had figured out what the name of that group was, because they were so like, they were such a mess that I just kind of want to find them again and play them for somebody and be like, do you see this? I saw these guys in person. And yes, it was this bad. But he decides that he wants to keep them there by going and hiring some professional party-going women. And this is not like, it's not an escort service. These aren't women who are like going to pretend to be dating them or sleeping with them or anything. They are just meant to sort of add in a feel to this party of, oh, there's a lot of cute girls here. And this is absolutely a thing, especially in like bigger cities and cities where there are a lot of people who are trying to get into gigs and meet people. It's a good way to like try and network while you're getting paid for your time. Provided that the party has some people in it that are at all powerful or have positions anywhere. The problem, of course, is that then you like are trying to network and it's hard to tell whether somebody is absolutely lying about the position that they hold at whatever company and just trying to get you into bed. But what are you going to do? And yeah, they had all been thinking that maybe they wanted to bail because boxing can be kind of boring and they want to go to a bar and meet some honeys. So he calls all these, this company and pays for all of these women to come and perk up his party. And it's amazing. Like, how different the vibe is immediately, and that these dudes don't seem to really suspect that these girls are all hired. They just apparently think that he knows all of them and just is able to call them up, and they're all immediately available and also all pretty attractive. But I'm going to jump ahead here. There is a girl that Gray had had a massive crush on since like literally kindergarten. And he is, at first, she doesn't even remember him from school, and he's really like crushed. But then they start talking, and she's pretty into him. You know, she thinks he's really funny, and the whole time I just kept being like, is this real? Like, does she really like him? Or is she doing the thing that she's supposed to do for this job, which is pretend to be interested in dudes that are at the party in order to make the party more fun and interesting? I don't know, and it remains to be seen. I guess she was being serious because she gave him her actual number, and I don't know that that's something that you would do. But I also don't know how committed she is to, like, you know, this role or whatever. And she seems fine. She's nice. She doesn't seem super funny to me, or like, and that's the main thing for me. If somebody's not funny, I'm just kind of like, meh. But she's like, you know, she doesn't seem like there's any huge red flags. And so he's feeling pretty perked up. Everybody basically bails at the end of the night, except for White Josh. And he's hanging out and helping Daryl to clean up. And he feels really like, he's just trying to be a real good friend at this point, like, because he knows that the party gets left with, or the host gets left with all of this cleanup. And he says something about how he cleans up the wet bathroom at the end of or he cleaned up the wet bathrooms at the end of the night when he was like the party, the activities chair or something for his frat, which is also what Daryl had used to do. And Daryl's like, how does it get so wet? And they're both like, I don't know. And I'm like, oh God, this sounds horrible, guys. What is that? And at this point, Daryl sort of opens up with Josh and is like, yeah, I just, honestly, I wanted to make some friends and have you guys over because I miss my daughter and it's been hard and I've been kind of lonely and I just needed people around. And White Josh says, well, you made one. You made a friend. And he says, oh, that girl with the tube top? No, I paid for her. I paid for all the girls, actually. And Josh is just looking at him and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. You mean you. And Josh says, yeah, that's what I meant. And right here, I was a little bit like, is he flirting? A little bit. And I couldn't, like, because he has this smile. Let's talk about this. White Josh is very fratty looking and not really the type that I go for. But right here, I'm about to screenshot this. The smile that he gets on his face is like the room lights up. It's stupid. Like, it makes me annoyed that somebody can have that kind of smile and just fuck you up just in an instant. And I think we've all met somebody like this that, like, we're like, oh yeah, they're pretty cute. And then they get this expression and you're like, oh God, I need to look away because I'm about to lose control of myself. What the fuck? And that is what just happened to me watching him in this scene. Like, that is part of why I started to be like, no, he's not flirting. I just had a gut reaction to his unbelievable smile right here, but that's not what he meant at all. So he says, all right, well, I should leave. And he's going out the door and he gives Daryl a hug and a kiss on the cheek and kind of looks like, as he pulls away, like he's not sure, and then gives him a look and a wink and is like, see you later. And Daryl's just standing there for a second like, what? And then gets a smile on his face and just goes, oof. And I'm like, yo, oof is the fucking right thing to say right there. If he just smiled at me like he had done in that kitchen and then made a move like that, it'd be all over. I'd have been passed out on the floor. Like, forget it. Oh my God. Daryl, you get it. Get it. Yes. And he's like later on trying to be like, what does it mean if somebody gives you a kiss on the cheek? He wants to put it in you. Get it. Seriously, there is no misreading the look that he just gave you. He winked at you. Daryl, please. So, super duper excited for Daryl to hook up with White Josh and maybe be adorable gym going couple. And I'm just like really excited about it. So anyway, I only have 10 minutes left. I haven't even talked about what goes on with Rebecca yet. So she's volunteering with this crew and does not understand how to relate to young women. She keeps on doing things like talking about the patriarchy. And the thing is, like, maybe in certain crews of women this age, this would totally be on, they would be on board with this. But you test it out once or twice and they don't respond, you got to just move on, friend. Like, this is clearly not really, resonating with them. And Erica's talking. Sorry. She says, Daryl and I are kindred spirits. He's so silly. I've been waiting for this to happen since episode 3 when you said maybe Rebecca should hook up with White Josh. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know about White Josh, because clearly Daryl is bisexual. Like, he might be gay and he just wasn't sure that he was gay, but I am assuming he's bisexual. And White Josh, I don't know, is he just straight up gay? Because he might be bi too, and he might have been open to hooking up with Rebecca, but there's never really been a sexual tension as much as he's like super hot. I've never gotten that vibe from him, so I'm going to just go with gay. And I kind of enjoy that it doesn't seem like he's in the closet. I don't know if he is or not, but it doesn't seem like a plot point that his friends like talk about it with him or worry about it. So I'll be interested to see what it turns out they know and don't know and how they act with him about it. But yeah, so Rebecca, she's like really getting made fun of right out of the gate at this camp. Like when they meet up first, she wants to spend all of her time with Josh because she is here for him, but he's here for the kids, and any opportunity he has to spend time with them versus with her, he chooses them, which makes me respect him all the more because when he says that this matters to him, he's dead serious. Like, he wants these kids to have a chance, and so he is not going to put his friend whom he can see whenever ahead of these kids that are important to him. And I really, really like that. But of course, Rebecca doesn't really get it. She keeps being frustrated. And I'm like, Rebecca, the best way to make him notice you is for you to be good at dealing with these kids and really committed to that in the way that he is committed to it. It's sort of like, basically, if she's just doing everything in a tactical way to try and get his attention, what you do is you make things that are important to him be also important to you. It's not really that deep. Like, this is something that I always find funny is people are like, well, what should I do? And I'm like, well, what's something that they care about? Get involved in that. Like, that's it. It's really not, but unfortunately she doesn't really, and she winds up like getting hit in the face at one point. The girl from Glow who plays Machu Picchu, is that the name that she goes by on Glow? She's in this as like a high school student. I always forget how like young she is, so honestly it works. She winds up like bashing Rebecca in the face with her elbow, and Rebecca goes down and has a black eye for like the rest of the thing. They bust into a conversation where they're talking about some guy being shitty, and she says something about how like in 10 years you won't even remember him, which is just so irrelevant. Like, it's not untrue is the thing, but that's not a thing that girls are interested in hearing. They want to talk about what they're going through, and assuring them that none of this is actually important is the surest way to completely lose their trust, really, when it comes right down to it, because it's diminishing what they're experiencing. This is something that I wish so much people would remember, is what it was like when they were in high school and going through this stuff. It felt like the literal end of the world. It felt like everything was just falling apart because this is all you know. And while you may have the benefit of hindsight as an adult and realizing that was not what was going on, it still felt that way to you then. So don't behave as if they should suddenly have the perspective of a 40-year-old, I just, it's hard to watch her trying to talk to these girls as if she were talking to peers, because it's of course not going to work. So she has this old love letter that she wrote to Josh when she was in camp with him, and she starts reading it to him, and she had said something to Paula about doing it, and Paula immediately cuts her off, and it's like, absolutely not. This is a horrible idea, and I appreciate that because she's right. But Rebecca goes ahead and does it anyway, and is reading him this silly kind of poem about him playing frisbee with his shirt off next to the dumpster, and the moles were a constellation on his chest, and he's sort of like laughing and smirking. And she says, "Dear Joshua, when we frolic, I feel like, and not to be hyperbolic." And this is all sung. "I could die of happiness when I'm nestled in your hairless arms, like were Tristan and Isolde, ancient lovers rotting desperately in the forest." And he starts laughing. "Rebecca, sweetie, I don't know how to tell you this. This is hilarious. This is why Paula told you not to do this. This is a weird poem, and he is not wrong to laugh. And the fact that you don't see the humor in this is alarming to me. Like, how do you not read this and see how funny this is?" Just lady. And she gets so hurt by it. And she goes to the speech that she's supposed to do, like the empowering women's speech, and the girls are all making fun of her, and she breaks down in front of them. And they wind up sort of like coming to her aid to sort of support her, but they're also talking about doing a makeover. And this leads to a song with all of these high school girls, "Put Yourself First." And it's all about alleged self-care and alleged like empowerment, but purely for the male gaze, really. And there's literally a dude holding a camera with the words "male gaze" on his shirt. It's very, very unsubtle. And this is really, it's one of those things, right? This balance, because I have said many times that when I was younger, I was confused about the way that people would react to how I dressed, because I would wear really revealing clothing because I thought I looked great. And there were a lot of girls at my school who assumed I did this for attention. And like, in so much as I do it for attention because I look good and I want to look good, then sure. But they acted like I was doing it because I was like trying to get guys. And like, I was like, I already have a boyfriend. What do you even mean? Like, it didn't even occur to me what they were trying to say. And so making yourself sexy and making yourself pretty and doing things like to like with makeup and whatever can be empowering. It absolutely can be just for you. But you can also totally lie to yourself about why you're doing it as well and pretend it's just for you and it's totally meant for somebody else. And I really like that it's high school girls singing this. Like, that is on point for me, that this is an age where you're really sorting through that and not always doing it for the right reasons. So yeah, this song is really good. And she's like, put yourself first in a sexy way. She's like, can't I just be comfortable? And they're like, no, put a hole in your earlobe just for yourself. It's like all of this makeover stuff that's like not super fun for her. And she's doing supposedly because it's just fun, but she's not actually enjoying it. And it ends with her being a little bit more done up. They've tried to put concealer on the allergic reaction mosquitoes that blew up all over her body. Let's just talk about that makeup real quick. On her, like the makeup that the team working on the show did to make it look like she'd been stung by mosquitoes. That's nasty. They did a real good job of making those look incredibly painful and hideous. And Josh walks in and asks if he can talk to her, and he takes her aside and he says that he found the rest of the letter because she like threw it in the trash, I think. And the rest of the letter says, "You're my hero. I believe in you. There's nothing you can't do. You make a difference in the world. And you make all the difference in the world to me." And she inadvertently said exactly what he needed to hear in that moment. And this is one of those things that like you can kind of toss aside if you're watching this from the outside. But I absolutely have been this person that needed to hear something so badly and was not hearing it. I'll just say it, from Brendan. And then Owen came into my life, and it was like he just understood precisely who I was and what I needed in a way that Brendan never had. And that's part of why the podcast began to take off after splitting up with Brendan, was because he straight up did not believe that what I wanted to do, which was podcast full time, was possible or smart or a real job. Like, he insinuated a lot when I brought it up that it was just me trying to get out of doing actual work. And it was really tough because there were parts of me that believed him. That's the thing about having a partner that doesn't believe in you, is if you are doubtful at all, they will zero in on things that you also think. And it's tough to just set that aside. And there are a lot of times where I downplay what I do. Even now, I work a lot, and yet I still tell myself that I don't do enough. And the other day, like, Brennan just would constantly sort of downplay the efforts that I was making and not appreciate what I was doing. And I don't even mean just with the podcast. I just mean household wise, you know. And the other day I was talking to Owen, and I said something about how he works too much. And Owen laughed in my face and was like, "You work more than me. Are you kidding?" And the fact that he noticed that and called me out on it, I was just like, do I? And once I started to think about it, I was like, I guess I do. But, oh, yeah. And just like somebody who notices the effort and doesn't immediately discount it because it doesn't look like the kind of work they're used to seeing. That's important, you know. All that Valencia is valuing is whether or not he's making money and has a job that is like kind of respectable and traditional. But he's out here making a real difference with these kids who care about him and like him. And that's not something that she values. And that comes down to a fundamental difference in priorities and understanding of the world, you know? So having been with a partner who did not believe in me and who did not encourage me really at all, I understand Josh's feeling here of suddenly somebody saying that you matter, you know. And the other day yesterday, I was with Owen and we were talking about work, and I was just like saying how I can get so frustrated and overwhelmed. And he like grabbed my hand and said, "Babe, you work so hard and I am really proud of you. You're doing really well." And it just meant everything. Like, I replayed that moment since it happened yesterday, like in my head, like 3 times. Just, you know, it's just somebody who gives a shit about what's important to you, even if it's not something they're specifically interested in. It just makes you feel like they're paying attention, you know? And that's really what it is I want you to see me for who I am. That's all we all really want, you know? And it's hard to find, surprisingly. You can meet people that it seems like that's happening, and it's not. It's a bit of like you get kind of fooled. And Josh is being seen, and he's liking it. So I guess we'll see what happens there. But he winds up kissing her on the cheek. And the girls watching are kind of like, "Oh, he should have kissed you on the mouth." And I'm like, no, that would have like made him seem a lot shittier if he was willing to just like low-key cheat on Valencia. I would not have respected that. But he kisses her on the cheek, and it's borderline. It's still a little bit like, oh, Josh. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, yeah, but I get it. So I liked it. I thought that was a really good place to end. And Rebecca seems really satisfied with that too. So yeah, this episode, like lots of awkward moments and moments that I'm just like, oh my God, just her just putting herself out there in this way that is so cringe inducing and not understanding why he's laughing. But also I do like, I really relate to Josh's perspective here. And I love what's happening with Daryl so much. So I'm out of time and I'm going to have to go, but thank you guys again so much for listening. Thank you to Julia again for commissioning the episode, and I will see you again soon with a new episode. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
an Unspoiled Network podcast.